Welcome back to the Manor. Julian McBain here, and we are back with Easter Mayhem. And, yeah, considering this is being recorded on Palm Sunday, we're about a week out from Easter, and I believe Easter Mayhem actually ends not long after Easter itself. Because Easter's next weekend, it ends on the 19th, so yeah, the following Tuesday, which makes sense, because for some reason, Tuesdays are the important day for video games. No one has been able to explain to me why, but hey, who am I to judge, right? So, yeah, we're going to chat about a couple of things and see where this goes. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, please consider going to patreon.com/JulianMcBain if you want to support my work. If you do, you'll get exclusive content. Like for the month of March, you got the first Boneworks Backstage. And for the month of April, I would expect the second Boneworks Backstage to make itself manifest. And that's the plan so far. Just so that you are all aware, that we'll do a quick channel update. I have started on my VR playthrough of Job Simulator, which, as I've mentioned before, is, in my opinion, one of those games that you have to, if you're a content creator in a specific field, there's going to be things that are just kind of part of the package. So Portal Run for regular content creation, doing your basic how-tos in Entropia Universe for Entropia Universe content creation, and playing Job Simulator for VR content creation. So, and I'm not just doing it out of obligation. I actually enjoy the game. It's a lot of fun. Very whimsical. Very, very whimsical. See, that's not really my jam. The world's most average worker. My boss would probably say the same thing. SRS Business Incorporated. This is sufficiently corporate. So it looks like I've got a coffee maker here. Like, that's disgusting.
Howdy, neighbor.
Oh, hi. So I've got my coffee. Lighten it up appropriately. But it's just one of those things that's a lot of fun to do, and it messes with your brain just a little bit. But that's in a process. It's a short game, so it's not like it's going to take a huge number of videos, but it's going to take several, so that'll be fun. Okay. So, the reason that this video is coming out late is because I spent Saturday of this week, when I normally do these recordings, or video editing in the case of these Mayhem videos, in New Hampshire, about 3 hours away, at a church function, and that was very interesting. And I know that a lot of you probably don't necessarily have a huge interest in specific religious life, but I had never been to, it was a minister's meeting, even though I'm not a minister, because church staff, people who do volunteer work for it, also are allowed to go or are asked to go. It was very interesting to be able to interact with people from so many different congregations, and it's a very diverse crowd of people. And so just being able to interact with that many people was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, it did mean that I didn't get back until after 8 p.m. last night. I left by 10:30-ish, so I was gone all day. It's a 2.5-hour drive each way. I did get to eat at T-Bone's, though, which is a restaurant in New Hampshire. If you're ever in New Hampshire and you like steak, I strongly recommend it. They know how to make their steaks perfectly. I ordered rare, I actually got rare. I didn't get medium rare, I didn't get blue rare, I got actually rare. Perfectly made, perfectly made. So, and the mushrooms, oh, goodness gracious me. Amazing. So, I'm sure you all cared about what I did on a Saturday, but that's okay. But yeah, no, that's why this video is coming out late on Sunday rather than at its normal time. And so with that, we're going to get into the subject for today's video. And the primary subject of today's video is going to be kind of a throwback to the McBain moments. I want to go back into more of the philosophical parts of life, which is what I used to do in Entropia Universe. I used to do the McBain moments. I've kind of touched on it from time to time. But this one kind of spoke to me. as I was doing my company's marketing for the last week. And as you all know, or as many of you know, I do marketing as part of my primary profession, which might be why I don't sound terrible on these videos. But the quote is from Samuel Johnson, and it goes, "Great works are performed not by strength, but by perseverance." And there's a lot packed into that sentence. There's a lot packed into it. Because when we think of great works, we think of these huge accomplishments, right? The works of Michelangelo, the works of Leonardo da Vinci. And we take for granted what went into creating those works. We think that they were geniuses, and obviously they were. There's very little contention that the great masters like Da Vinci and Michelangelo were not geniuses. It's just, I'm fairly sure it's self-evident that that was the case, at least in their specific field. Or in Da Vinci's case, in every field, because apparently he did everything. But none of the works they did were specific feats of strength. And here's what I mean by that. The work that Da Vinci did to make his big projects, the things he's famous for, right? The Da Vinci tank, the ornithopter, the Mona Lisa. None of these, although each individual work was a tour de force, and each individual work was a feat of strength in itself, it did not just spawn out of a single attempt, right? He spent years honing skills, figuring out how to make the colors blend in a certain way, make the eyes pop in a certain way. He was an engineer of sorts, so he had to figure out how the dimensions of an object would affect its movement. And everyone looks at the Da Vinci tank and says, oh, obviously this tank doesn't work because the way it's designed is very faulty. And the problem with people who think that is that they're very short-sighted. See, during the age in which Da Vinci lived, he lived in an age where military secrets like today were very, very important. And something like Da Vinci's tank could be a game changer on a medieval battlefield because it was a sheltered area loaded with guns that could easily make the difference in a war, especially when your opponents may only have bows and arrows. And even if you yourself did not have cannon but instead only had crossbows, it still would make a difference because your enemy's crossbows would not penetrate the wooden hull of the tank. So putting in a critical fault on purpose would have been an intelligent thing for Da Vinci to do. And this was actually shown, this was displayed at a Society for Creative Anachronism event called, I believe they showed it at Gulf Wars for the first time. So what happened was the Midwest Regions organization known as North Shield, it's a kingdom, they split it into 20, the organization split into 20 kingdoms, which all take a region, have X number of people in them, and they have their own unique cultural fit, right? Well, the Kingdom of North Shield, in full disclosure, I lived there during this time, but I did not have anything to do with the project itself, even though I was a member of the group, like the kingdom, as it happened, and I was a fighter in the kingdom when it happened, but I had nothing to do with this particular project. They built a Da Vinci tank that would work legally on the SCA battlefield. And they actually had to get it approved by like 5 different levels, or some absurd amount of levels for experiment. But they fielded this tank. And the amount of force multiplier that this wooden tank made it very obvious that if they had ever fielded it during the time of Da Vinci's life or shortly thereafter, while cannon were still fairly immobile, it would have made a huge difference. And it could have changed the course of battles, because swarming a tank of that nature would not be considered anything close to safe. Unsurprising, because it's a giant wooden structure that's mobile, so it's essentially a siege tower, but the people locomoting it are undercover, whereas like a siege tower, they were not undercover, they were exposed, except by the tower itself. And then of course if you lose too many of them, then you end up not being able to move the tower very efficiently, and then it comes in danger of being hit by fire. Well, with this tank, not only was it a wooden structure, it would not be hard to put a thin steel barrier around it. And you're like, well, what good does thin steel do? Because a crossbow bolt could sail through a set of plate armor. And yes, this is very, very true, and a crossbow bolt could do the same thing if you made the thin armor of the tank. But a longbow arrow would not go through it, and more importantly, a fire arrow, which would have very little penetration, would not be able to penetrate through to the wooden superstructure underneath. And what this would do is provide you with a fire-resistant shell from which you could shoot. And although there's going to be the occasional lucky shot from a sharpshooter of some such firing through one of the ports out of which you can fire, and that's always a challenge to deal with, and you're going to have those sharpshooters, the fact of the matter is that there was this opportunity for it to dominate the battlefield. Now, of course, they never perfected Da Vinci's tank. The design itself, I believe, was lost until it became impractical. But the idea was that they came out with it, and Da Vinci's genius would not really be realized until World War I, when the first tanks the first land ships, which would later be called tanks, would take to the battlefield over the trenches. But it's the perseverance of the idea and taking the notion of the idea that really made the difference. And today, you see tanks all over the battlefield. Tanks dominate, especially in open spaces. The only places that tanks really can't fight very efficiently now are in dense areas, mostly urban and wooded. And that's always been the case. You're never going to be able to get this giant-ass machine that is tracked to be able to dominate rough terrain, super rough terrain, or cities. And there's two reasons for that. One, when it comes to woods, tracked machines do better than most other machines, and that's just a fact, because they bring the road with them. That's why they designed the tracks the way they did. They wanted to make it so the road itself was mobile, so that the vehicle could go off-road. And so with that, they created the tracks, but tracks still get hung up. They're still vulnerable to being messed with. And if you can't span a gap, you can get stuck pretty easy, and tanks are not anything close to light. So that is a major issue. And in cities, top armor of a tank is the weakest part of the tank, and they very easily fall prey to infantry in buildings. And here's the thing about urban warfare. If you are attacking a city, the first thing you know as a general is that you're ceding the high ground to your opponent, to your enemy. When you're doing urban combat, you have a couple of really bad options. The first option is bad because it wipes out the city. You could level the city, which doesn't really gain you anything, right? Because the purpose of taking a city is to take over the commercial and urban area that it represents, and flattening the city. Oh, and the industries that would be housed there, which is very, very common. You flatten the city, and you've lost any notion of making it so that the city is productive for a very long time, if ever again. This was the problem in World War II. We had to level entire cities in order to achieve small military victories, and the result meant that Europe had to be rebuilt from the ground up after the war was over, and it took decades. The second option is to go building to building, and that is incredibly slow. And you never know if you're dealing with civilians or military targets, because intelligent military targets will hide themselves. And going building to building, door to door is, just ask the U.S. Army going through villages in Iraq, and that wasn't even very urbanized for the most part. Not an easy thing to do, not fun. And easy to lay traps. So ugly, ugly, ugly. And the third is that you skip over buildings and hope to God you don't have RPGs and other shells raining down on your head. So there you go. That's the reason. And I know I got off topic a little bit. We were on the subject of Da Vinci's tank, but the purpose of that tangent was to say that it was the perseverance of the idea, not the strength of it, that ended up winning out in the end. Da Vinci's tank was a great work, and Da Vinci's ideas themselves were great works. But it was the perseverance of the idea, not the strength of the idea, that caused the idea to eventually be adopted in the long run. And those things take a very long time to really make themselves manifest. On the same notion, it is perseverance that helps you in every walk of your life. So how do you get better at a thing? Like when you want to become a fighter, right? Let's say you want to do what I do and become a fencer. This is something that is easy for me to relate to, so please forgive the example. To become a fencer, first you have to learn how to fence. So to do that, you go and take lessons, whether it's at an SCA event or with practice with a group there, not an event, but at a practice with a group there, or you go to an Olympic fencing school, or you go to a HEMA school, the Historical European Martial Arts schools that are scattered around the world, and learn how to do these things That's the start of it. And it's not your strength that's going to cause that to be... Holy shit, that is a Hall of Fame. That is a Hall of Fame. 1,419 ped. Huge thanks to MindArc for that. Yes, this is edited video, but I forgot where that was in the video. That just popped up. So, and I'm going to tangent here for a second on purpose. I had to open up the HOF list just because I didn't believe it. Like, I'm staring at the shrapnel in my inventory. I had to check the HOF list just because I didn't believe that was the case. And as it happened, it was. I was number 33 on the list at the time. Just, holy crap. That's only the second real HOF I've had in the game. Like, I've been part of shared HOFs where you go after the Dunwich Horror on Monria, and you get a HOF, but it's split so among so many players that you only end up with like a ped. This was a true HOF, and I've just, wow. Okay, fun stuff. Anyway, so you go and you take lessons, and those lessons take time, and you hone the skill over years. Okay? It's not strength that gets you, although you will gain strength. Your legs are going to get stronger. Your arms are going to get stronger. You're going to become more steady. Your nerves are going to get better. You're not going to have as much anxiety, although anxiety can be an issue. It's that gradual turn, time after time, of building up that endurance. It is very important that you do that. That's how you end up building the skill. But you're not building raw strength. You're building endurance, and that's perseverance. As you persevere, and especially in an organization like, say, the SCA, where there's other things than fighting, and this is going to be true of any group, but when you're in a political simulation, which is what the SCA is, it's a cultural, political, and martial simulation, there's going to be politics involved. I'm not necessarily talking about your mainstream media politics that you see on the television every day that you're just sick of hearing about. It's internal, right? Between kingdoms, between baronies and shires, and between individuals and households and stuff like that. And so you have that all mixed in too, and you have to prove yourself to the people that know the right people. You have to learn how to network with folks in order to get the recognition for the work that you do sometimes. And that's not a bad thing, because it also teaches you how to network. It teaches you how to work with folks. But a lot of people aren't prepared for that. And so it's that perseverance is how you climb the ladder of recognition, the ladder of incidents, and become better at what you do. And that's how you become good at any skill that you could possibly think of ever. And when you finally have that set of skills, you go and you start to create your magnum opus. Now, in the case of martial arts, it might be a video displaying your skills, or it might be instructional. It might be a student that you progress through the same things that you'd already been through, or even push them beyond where you've gotten. As a former instructor, I would say that if one of my students had been able to surpass me, and I only instructed for a short time, only a couple of years, and so there's a strong possibility they will, but that will not be because of the limited amount of time that I provided them instruction. That will not be my accomplishment for teaching them. That will be that would be all their accomplishment. But let's say that wasn't the case. Let's say that they were instructors. I was able to instruct them for years and years and years, and we built them up and we got them through the ranks, and they ended up becoming a master. Especially since there's very little chance with the amount of other things I do in life that I will necessarily be able to put the time in to earn the rank of mastery in fencing. If I was able to push one of them into mastery, to me that would be the magnum opus as an instructor. And so that's how a lot of instructors see things. If they're able to either drag them up to their level or even push them beyond their level, that's that great work. And then for other walks of life, if you are an engineer, let's say you're Elon Musk, very few people can say that Elon Musk's magnum opus was not putting a rocket out into space and dropping a sports car into orbit. He's going to have a hell of a time topping that, okay? The man's peaked, and he's roughly, not even 50? And he hasn't peaked because he's going to find some ridiculousness to do next. Next thing you know, the man's going to create warp drive. I actually hope that's the case, and when it comes to Elon Musk, when he and Rogan were talking, and of course they'd been smoking that doobie, and Rogan up and asks him if he's an alien, and Elon just looks at him with this little smile on his face and doesn't answer, right? So I'm kind of inclined to believe that Elon Musk might be an alien. And I'm not saying that to cast shade. I think that would be really cool. I think it would be hilarious if he just like pulls a mask off and he looks mostly the same, but he's got like a green hue to his face, like in an Elysian, or if he has like pointed ears like a Vulcan or some shit like that. I think that would be amazing. Or if he turns out to be like some sort of cybernetic life form or semi-cybernetic life form. That would be hilarious. I would laugh for a week straight. Not gonna lie. Week straight, wouldn't stop laughing. That would be my life. But look at the work he put into everything he does. Right? That's not a feat of individual an individual feat of strength. That is built up work and effort over years of time. And that's what it means to have perseverance. That is the most important thing you can do. And we've talked about things like this time and time again on this channel, about how important it is to grind things out. It's the watchword of Entropia Universe. This is the best lesson that this game can teach you, is perseverance. It's one of the reasons I try to get my 14-year-old to play Entropia Universe, because I know for a fact if he plays Entropia Universe and is able to build his avatar up anywhere close to where my avatar is, because I play an absurd amount of Entropia Universe most of the time, then he's going to be able to learn the skill of perseverance to do other things. It's really good for focus, or to understand and know how to split your attention effectively. So when you're forced to split your attention, you're able to do so in a way where it doesn't detract from your results. And this is one of those things where if you're an Entropia Universe player and you can grind an Entropia Universe the way people grind an Entropia Universe, I don't see what the hell your problem is trying to go out and figure out the thing that you really want to make her do. And I know most of the people watching this are Entropians. So I want you to pause for a minute. You can go ahead and pause this video. Pause for a minute and think about what it is that's stopping you from accomplishing what you want to accomplish. Okay, now that you've hit play again, in general, it's going to be perseverance. And if you're like, well, Julian, I don't have the money. Okay, great. Whole series of videos on building your finances on this channel. Go watch them. I'm not even monetized. Well, at the recording of this, I'm not monetized. Let me rephrase that. At the time of this recording, I am not monetized. You don't even have to deal with commercials, at least until I hit 1,000 subscribers. Go watch those videos. That'll help you with your finances. You don't like me that much on finances, or if you think I'm full of shit, there's a half dozen really smart people on YouTube who talk about money and know what the hell they're talking about. A lot of them are going to know more than I do, and I've been doing this shit for 10 years. Money's not an excuse. Not long term. Short term, absolutely. Absolutely, that can be an obstacle. And I am not denigrating those people who are having trouble ends meet, especially in light of COVID-19 and the economic downturn that came after, and the inflation that we're experiencing now, which is over 8%. Not denigrating that at all. There are ways to mitigate for it. And if it's not something that, if money's the big issue, a lot of the skills you want to learn, you can find ways to work with them that don't require a lot of money. Unless it's the documentation you require, unless it's the certificate, right? Because I know we have a lot of credentialism in the modern age. If it's the credential that you're missing, you can still earn the skill, and then when you have the opportunity to go for the credential, you'll fly right through it. Okay? Udemy's out there. There are Allisons out there. There are MOOCs that are cheap or free. You've got things like University of the People that are extremely inexpensive, and that one's accredited. Full disclosure, I'm a student at University of the People. They are not a sponsor. I wouldn't even want them to be a sponsor because that would be a conflict of interest. There's plenty of opportunity for you to learn a skill. If you want to learn how to blacksmith, There are organizations that deal with blacksmithing. Many of them only do it for cost of materials. A lot of them just want to help people learn how to do an art that isn't out there anymore. And yeah, you're going to find a lot of blacksmiths that can't be bothered. That's called life. But you can find people who know a skill that would be willing to teach you. You just have to put the effort forth. And for some of them, it's going to cost money, and for some of them, it's going to cost very little or nothing at all. When it comes to materials, a lot of times you're going to have to supply your own tools and material. Save a little every week, okay? You can do these things. And if you're an Entropian, you have what it takes to accomplish anything. Because the biggest thing you need to accomplish anything is the endurance to put up with the bullshit that it takes to learn anything. So go out and figure out what it is you want to do, and then lay down what the criteria for success are. And after you've laid out those criteria, go seek those criteria. And this is another thing I'm going to touch on before, because we're going to be coming up to the end here pretty quick. You have to set the conditions for success. And people don't like doing that, because by setting conditions for success, you're also setting conditions for failure. Well, guess what, kids? If you don't set conditions for success, everything is a condition of failure. You failed by default. Be willing to have the courage to set the conditions for failure. And believe me when I say, you will fail. You will screw up. You will come up against hiccups. But as long as you don't give up, you yourself are not a failure. It just means you failed at that attempt. I'm going to say that again. As long as you don't give up, that doesn't make you as a person a failure. It just means you failed at that attempt. And it's very easy to recover from it as long as you pick your ass back up and get back on doing the thing. Okay? I went back to college after 14 years to pursue a degree. And I'm doing it from scratch. I'm not making any transfer credits, at least not at this point. I might do it for algebra. I got an A in algebra. I really don't want to do that again. But anyway. Sometimes you got to start over. Sometimes you have to start over years later. And sometimes that means you got to do things over. There are classes I'm going to have to take again. Macroeconomics is a good one. No, I'm sure I'm going to have to take a math class or English comp, which blows my mind. That's going to be for me, that's going to be a class I practically sleep through. Doesn't mean I don't need to do it. Doesn't mean I can't pay. I don't have to pay attention. I say that I could practically sleep through it. I'm very proud of my ability as a writer. I'm not perfect, but I'm very strong in that dimension. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to have to pay attention and make sure I'm doing the work. Okay? Sometimes it means doing things that you already know again. And no, it's not fun. You know, right now I'm taking a class on Python. I haven't coded in Python in 10 years. But Python's a piss easy language to learn. But the foundations the class itself are going to teach me using a language that I'm not hugely fond of and that is very simplistic, relatively speaking. And I'm sure I've got Python coders in here that are probably going to pull their hair out and yell at me in the comments. Please feel free. Please feel free. But the fact of the matter is that's a step that needs to be taken on the road to learning more of the skill. Get it? Perseverance. That's what it's about. And that doesn't mean you're not going to run into roadblocks. It doesn't mean you're not going to run into frustrations. Those are part of the game. You're going to have roadblocks. You're going to have frustrations. You're going to have days where you just don't want to do this shit no more. And sometimes you got to take a break. Sometimes you got to pause. And sometimes it means walking away for a while. I don't necessarily recommend it because it means you're going to have to remember things that you forgot. But if you run into a case where you're just utterly overwhelmed, then it's not necessarily a bad idea. Sometimes that's just the way shit works. So if that's the case, the only person who can really make those decisions and knows you very well is going to be you. And you have to know what your limits are. And there's no shame in accepting that you have a limit for now. Just understand that the optimal growth happens when you're operating at the limits of your skill and having the perseverance to continue pushing through the anxiety, through the depression, through the lack of desire to go any further, through all of the crap that you know you're going to have to deal with. That's how you win. That is how you win, my friends. So, okay, I'm going to call it here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. And as always, I really appreciate the support. Please consider going to patreon.com/JulianMcBain, become a member, and we'll see you in the next one.